Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 705, and today's date is June 30th, 2015, and the title of this episode is U.S. Government Central Bankers Are Ready to Cover Up the Economic Disaster. Now, before we get started here, I just want to make a short announcement. Tomorrow, Wednesday, I'll be uploading an interview with Eric Sprott. So if you are on the alert system for the X22report.com, you will receive an email. If you subscribed to the X22 Report Spotlight channel, you should get an email from YouTube saying there's a new video uploaded. If you do not get that, you can always go right to the channel on YouTube by typing in X22 Report Spotlight, or just come to the X22report.com site and you will see the interview on the right-hand side in the sidebar. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, if we go back to 2012, 2013, we remember that President Hollande, during that time period, told the French people and the world that France was in a recovery. Things are looking up, and we have to remember during this same time period, this is when they were going to try to get into Syria by using sarin gas. And it turns out that France was not in a recovery after all. WikiLeaks just released a new batch of NSA intercepts, and one of them in particular stands out, saying that during a certain period of time in mid-2012 moving forward, France's economic situation was far worse than indicated. And we can see at this point in time, even as we go forward from this point, the French economy has not improved whatsoever. Let's fast forward 3 years. And not only did French unemployment just hit an all-time new high, we're seeing that the economy throughout Europe and the United States, Canada, Australia, it's all continually getting worse. Yes, they can cover it up with the creation of money, which the EU is doing, the Fed is doing. But this can only be sustained for so long. I mean, we see what's happening in Greece. We see that a debt problem is not the solution. It's actually the problem. And we understand right now that Greece is looking to make a deal with the EU, or they're looking to step away from the EU and go maybe with Russia or the BRICS system. Right now, everything is in limbo. I mean, we have NATO out there, and the NATO Prime Minister is saying, listen, we will help Greece by offering financial assistance. We are ready to help Greece survive its economic crisis with cooperation in tourism, energy, and trade. Well, we know this is not going to fly. We know that Greece is not going to make a payment on Tuesday, today. And when they don't, the bailouts run out. They default. And this happens at midnight. So Cyprus decided to propose a 2-year agreement with the ESM, I should say, the Crisis Resolution Fund for Eurozone countries, to cover the country's financial needs. The loan will be used to meet its debt service payments of Greece's external and internal debt obligations. And he put this out there to the ECB, to the IMF. The central bankers responded saying, absolutely not. We are not going to do this whatsoever. Merkel completely shot it down. The Eurogroup refuses to extend the bailout program to Greece. And Scheibel said that Greece may be able to tap EU support fund, and even if Greece has a no vote, they can stay in the EU. We can see at this point in time that the situation in Greece is definitely getting worse. It is not getting better. We see the ECB is striking back and they're threatening Greece with deposit haircuts, otherwise known as bail-ins. Greek banks will have no choice but to impose a massive haircut on existing deposits. Since the entire ELA will be yanked, the only scenario left here is the Cyprus scenario, and that would go into the banks, take the people's money. And we can see right now that we always knew that this could be a possibility. We always knew eventually they were going to use those bail-in documents. They were going to present them and say, okay, look, we tried everything else. Now we need to go deep into the banks, raid the depositor's money, take the money, we'll give them the worthless bank stock. But a lot of people knew this was coming. They knew, and they took their money out of the bank. Now, Greece is threatening to seek a court injunction against the EU institutions to block the country's expulsion from the euro and to halt the asphyxiation of the banking system. And we're going to have to watch how this plays out, and we're going to have to see if they go ahead and use the bail-in scenario. Now, as all this is going on, it's not like the central bankers haven't made any money from this. We see reports that ahead of the 462 million euro payment by Greece to the IMF on Thursday, this was back in April 9th, figures released that by the Jubilee Debt Campaign show that the IMF has made 2.5 billion euros of profit out of its loans to Greece since 2010. If Greece does repay the IMF in full, this will rise to 4.3 billion euros by 2024. So remember, the central banks, they have no allegiance to any country or to any people. Their allegiance is to debt, to profit, and to take those countries and to steal their natural resources and to make them so in a place where they can't function that they need more and more debt. And this is what we are seeing all over the world right now. Wherever the private Western central banks are, this is what we are seeing. Each country is being put into more and more debt. And of course, this debt cannot be repaid. It's completely impossible at this time. There is no economic growth. And the Greek people realize if they stay with the EU, they're just going to get the same of what they already have. That's more debt, no jobs, and austerity. But we see the Greek people, they're not just holding on to their euros. They're trading them in for physical gold. Demand for physical gold from Europeans have surged. Greek ATMs now limit the withdrawal to 60 euros per day. The Greeks are panicking. They're buying food, fuel, and medicine. Now, I've said this in many reports, they should have been prepared. They should have had the fuel already. They should have had the food already. They should have had their cash withdrawn from the banks. They should have had gold and silver on hand. Think about this, because you know these supplies eventually are going to run out. You know there'll be nothing left on the shelves. And I have pictures already on the X22Report.com site that show that a lot of the shelves in the supermarkets, they're completely empty. This is what it looks like when there's a collapse situation. People are scrambling right now to get whatever they can. And now is the time to think about this and say, wait a minute. If this can happen in Greece, we just saw it happen in Cyprus. We know that France, we know that Italy, we know that Spain, UK, Germany, it's a complete domino effect. And we know that this is going to spread right back to the source, and that's the United States. And we know all those other countries like Canada, Australia, they're going to be sucked into this one way or another. And when this does happen, we are going to see the same exact thing. This is why you need to be prepared. We discussed this many, many times. I know there are people out there saying, no, don't worry. I remember when the Hurricane Sandy was coming to the Northeast. People up there, I have a lot of relatives up there, were saying that, no, don't worry, we're fine, nothing's going to happen. The storm hit, no electricity, people didn't have food, people didn't have electric, they didn't have heat, they didn't have a weapon to protect their family. Well, this storm is not just going to come across, hit once, and then leave. This storm is going to stay on top of us for quite a while. And it's going to make the situation very, very hard for people. And this is why you need to continually stock up on food, batteries, medical supplies. If someone has some type of medical condition, you need to make sure you have the medicine for your family members. Make sure you have a weapon. Make sure you have cash on hand. Make sure you have gold. If you're not prepared for any of this, there's other places you can go to speed it up. You can go to lifereliance.com. They have pre-packaged goods, food preparation for any type of emergency. Not just food, they have supplies in there to help you. And it is a fast, easy way to ramp up your emergency preparations. And that's lifereliance.com. You can go right there. If you've been continually buying food, continually buying water, continually buying medical supplies, toiletries, keeping cash on hand, buying gold and silver, continue to do this because, again, we don't know exactly when this is going to hit. But we know it will. And when it does, it's all of a sudden going to take people by surprise. They're not going to realize what's happening. Now, if you've been noticing, the central bankers, they don't even want to give an inch whatsoever. They're continually saying no, no, no. Now, the question is, why wouldn't they write off a small portion of it? Why won't they give any type of concessions? And it seems like this is all part of an agenda. And it seems that the aim of the creditors in the negotiations with the Greek government from the start was to conduct an economic and financial strangulation of Greece. They wanted to lead the country into complete chaos and then overthrow the government and return Samaras to power. Right now, the plan isn't working the way they thought. Basically, they wanted a revolution and they wanted to replace Cyprus. This is what they were trying to do. And it seems right now they're pursuing this plan. They're trying to make the country suffer. They're trying to make the people say, we want the Eurozone. We can't take this anymore. And we need a different government. And they're trying to push their agenda. And this is definitely what it's starting to look like. Now, there are some possible paths for Greece. Now, Greece can stay in the Eurozone. This is the option likely to cause the small short-term disruption of the Greek economy. And as we know, they're going to have to agree to austerity and more conditions. Greece keeps the euro, but sits outside the Eurozone. This would not be a new drachma. Greece would lose the access to the ECB. Countries using a foreign country as legal tender have no access to a lender of last resort, which means that every bank liquidity crisis becomes a solvency crisis. They could have a currency board. Greece would create a new currency, but lock it to the euro, as Estonia did with the German mark in 1992 after it gained independence from the Soviet Union. We can have a dual system where they have the drachma and the euro, and they would circulate side by side. This has many historical precedents going back centuries. In practice, a dual system is likely to emerge when the Greek government runs out of euros and has to pay its domestic bills using IOUs, which would be the drachma. And then people would hoard the euro, and by default, they would use then the drachma. Or they can introduce the new drachma and basically switch currencies, which would give Greece control of its own monetary policy, and they would make the rules and they would start trading with other countries. So there's many different possible avenues. Even if the EU and the Greek government come to some type of decision, it's a temporary solution, because all they're doing is receiving more debt. They're not getting anything out of it. They're not spurring economic growth. And we're going to have to watch this very carefully as time goes on, because we see the situation is definitely heating up. We see here in the United States, the illusion is being broadcasted out to every single person. They want everyone to believe that everything is absolutely fine. And we see as Gallup's consumer confidence plunges, the conference board's consumer confidence explodes higher. They beat expectations from 94.6 to 101.4. The expectation was 97.4. The biggest driver of the headline spike is hope. People hope that their salary will go up. People hope that they'll get a better job. People hope that everything will work out fine. Well, June's 101.4 print is near the highest since 2007, and we know what happened in 2008. So hope is not going to do it. Hope is a good thing, but in reality and facts, hope really doesn't work, because when you see the facts, you understand the facts, you realize that this economy is doomed. We see the Chicago PMI has now missed 4 of the last 5 months. June's print is the weakest since September of 2009. Case-Shiller came out with their U.S. home price index. And of course, the corporate media is out there saying, oh, the housing price is at 9-year highs or whatever. Well, is that really that great? Because they dropped nearly half going back to 2008. So is this really that great? No, actually, if you look at the graph and you look at the housing prices, they are falling. The trend is in a decline. Right now, U.S. home price index dropped by 0.02%. What does this tell us? This tells us that we've reached the top. This is the hot season for real estate, and prices, and I've been looking around the country, they're going to fall, and they're going to fall hard. If the Fed tries to raise interest rates, this whole thing just completely falls apart. And they know this. We understand the Baltic Dry Index, which is raw material that the manufacturers, factories use to create goods, went all the way down to 600 points or so, shot back up to 859, now dropped down to 800. And it's continually falling right now. It's not getting better. And this tells us that the people are not purchasing, manufacturers then are not producing, and they don't need the raw material. And a lot of times, the Baltic Dry Index, we see it rise because of capsize rates and other things that push it up, but then eventually it comes right down. Now at this time, last year, the Baltic Dry Index was around 1,200 points. And it increased as we moved into the late summer, into fall to get ready for the holiday season, and that really shot up. But I want to compare that as we move forward to see exactly where it goes. Right now, we're way under where it should be. And when we start putting all of this together, we see that things are really starting to accelerate. I mean, Greece, Italy is considered to be the most financially troubled nations in the Eurozone, and then France. On Monday, Standard & Poor's / Greece's credit rating once again, and they believe there's a 50% chance of Greece leaving the euro. We see other financial pundits out there saying that there's an 87% chance of Greece leaving the euro. Greece is scheduled to make a 1.6 billion euro loan payment, and they've already stated that they're not going to make this. Greek banks have been totally shut down daily cash withdrawal is at 60 euros right now, and nobody knows when all these banks are just going to reopen and have business as usual. U.S. investors are far more exposed to Greece than most people realize, even though the White House and the spokesperson was out there saying, oh, don't worry. If something happens to Greece, nothing will happen here in the U.S. And like I said in many reports, it's always the opposite. The governor of Puerto Rico has announced, yeah, we can't pay our debts. We can't do it. And we know the government can't bail them out. So what's going to happen there? Ukraine has just announced that it may suspend debt payments if their creditors do not agree to take a 40% haircut. And remember, they're having confidential meetings with the creditors, and there will be gag orders, so no one knows what's going on there. This week, the Bank of International Settlement has just come out with the new report that says that, yeah, the central banks are now defenseless to stop the next major global financial crisis. We are in a huge problem area because the central banks have used up all their ammunition to fight the last crash. Now they made it worse, and things are not going to turn out well. And we see as time goes on, they won't. But don't worry, the Fed here in the United States is out there saying that the U.S. economy probably bounce back to annual growth rate of around 2.5% in the second quarter. And the labor market is now approaching full employment. This is coming from Vice Chairman Stanley Fischer, which he said this today, that everything seems absolutely fine. He sees wage growth. He sees continued job creation. Housing market is fantastic. Retail looks great. We're getting signals now that they're trying to push the propaganda that we're in this recovery and everything is absolutely fine. And we know it isn't. We see India's central bank governor, who is credited with foreseeing the 2008 financial crisis, said the world is currently facing Great Depression era problems. But now, it looks like he's backtracking on those comments. So they don't want the central bankers out there talking about problems in the economy, Great Depression era problems. They want them to say, no, what I really meant was everything is fine, and we're not looking at this whatsoever. We see the Fed out there pushing recovery. We see central bankers saying, no, this is not what I meant. And we can see at this point in time, they're trying to cover up what is really going on. And we know what's going on, and that is the economic collapse. Now, we all understand that the NSA is spying on the American people. They're spying on government officials. They're spying on Supreme Court justices. We understand they're spying on other countries. And there are latest documents that were published by WikiLeaks suggesting that America's snooping activities in France are far more extensive than they thought. Not only did the NSA eavesdrop on the country's presidents, but they eavesdropped on French corporations tracking deals worth over $200 million. Now, of course, the NSA is out there saying, well, this is for national security. No, they do not need to spy on companies and the deals they are making. This is what the NSA is being used for. They're being used to blackmail judges, to make politicians do what they want them to do. They're spying on patent ideas from the people around the country and around the world. Investment ideas. They're using it to their benefit. This has nothing to do with national security. And this is why everyone should be concerned, because they're out there telling everyone, oh no, this is for national security. It's top secret. They lied to us that they were even spying on us. And then we find out that it was all a lie, and we're finding out even further that they spy on companies, people, and they blackmail judges. So all of this has nothing to do with national security. This has to do with the government benefiting themselves. We understand the government is trying to push the TPP through, and a lot of the European countries and Australia right now is saying, wait a minute, Why is there so much secrecy around the TPP? Australian lawmakers have slammed the country's deal-making process as one lacking transparency and oversight. They've particularly criticized the currently negotiated TPP for its excessive secrecy. The report, entitled Blind Agreement, was a joint party report from the Labour, Liberal, and Green parties. They were scathing of the lengths of secrecy that those supporting the deals like the TPP are prepared to go to in order to get the bill passed. And this is happening in each country right now. They're looking at this and saying, no, under our laws, you need to tell us what this is. But here in the United States, of course, they can keep it a secret because the president decided, listen, the people don't need to know about it. Congress doesn't need to know about it. They don't need to discuss it. If they do, they could be put into jail. You can't make copies. You can't make notes. But it's good for the people. Well, we know it isn't. And a lot of countries now are starting to wake up. And they're starting to realize, yeah, what is this? And we see this continually happening throughout the world. But of course, the Congress went ahead and gave the fast track for the TAA. The next in line is the TPP. And this means that the president does not have to work with Congress to make any type of trade negotiation. It's basically like a dictatorship. We see out in Armenia, where it looks like there's another color revolution, being stirred up in this country. And this was all about a 16% hike in electricity prices, which is very odd to have these huge protests. But okay, let's go with it. The government there said, okay, we're going to suspend the electricity price hike. And the protesters say the president's concessions fell short. They want it completely reversed. So it was suspended right now. They're still not happy. And they're still protesting. This kind of shows us that something else is going on right now. Because if they suspended it, that means the normal price is back in existence. And there is no increase. Reversing it is the same effect. I mean, if they decide to increase the electricity costs once again, the protesters would be out there. But why are they continually protesting? Why won't they stop? Now, if the president comes out and reverses it, and they continually protest, then we know for sure that this is definitely a color revolution. And we have to remember, in Armenia, Russia's Gazprom is looking to purchase the Iran pipeline with Armenia, and we also understand that Armenia signed a document that allows Russia to have military forces in the country to like 2042 or 2044. And we know the U.S. government central bankers would love to kick out Russia and to put in their own pipeline or take control of that pipeline. We see out in Ukraine, Kiev wants a discount price from Russia. Russia's saying, well, we don't know if we're going to give any more discounts to the natural gas because it looks like at this point in time that everyone needs to pay the same rate. Well, the Ukrainian energy minister said, okay, listen, give us a discount price and we'll take a look at it. They took a look at the discount price that Russia gave, and they said, you know what, we're going to decline it. So Russia and Ukraine failed to reach new agreement on gas prices in Vienna. And right now Ukraine is going to suspend its purchases of Russian gas. Is this an indicator at this point that they're cutting themselves off from Russia? We're going into the summer months. They don't need as much. They probably have a lot in storage. And does this mean that the offensive is on because they just cut off the gas coming into the country? They did this once before, but then of course they went into the winter months. Now we're in the spring going into the summer. So it looks like we are headed towards another offensive. And we have to remember, McCain was in Ukraine giving a speech saying, listen, Ukraine is going to be off Russian gas within the next 2 years, which means it's already in the works, which means they could be a lot closer than we think. So we're going to have to watch this situation very, very closely. Now, hackers from the group called Cyber, they have leaked thousands of documents belonging to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. The leaked documents expose Kiev's plans to increase its military budget by nearly threefold over the next 3 years. They plan to increase the number of troops up to 250,000 because they are prepared and ready for this offensive. And they're trying to kick it off as soon as possible. They believe they're ready to go. Now, in Europe, we see that Europe might impose border controls between the countries. So this will no longer be an open and free EU community. Germany and France's joint proposal to allow Schengen zone countries to temporarily reintroduce border controls, but doing so would damage one of the strongest symbols of the European unity. The question is, why are they doing this? Why put border controls up? Well, they can stop the transfer of physical cash leaving the country. Because again, a lot of people are looking at the situation. A lot of people are saying, you know something, I want my physical cash and I might take it out of the country and, set up shop someplace else. Companies might do this. People might do this. And what they want to do is they want to keep all the currency in the country. And I believe at this point in time, they're going to be setting all of this up to keep control of the system so it does not collapse. So we have to watch this very carefully, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see something happen here in the United States to control the cash. The illegals can come in, but the cash cannot leave. Now, back in March, the European Commissioner, Jean-Claude Juncker, said that the European Union needed to create a unified army of its own to respond to threats to the central banking system. Now, it seems that 1 in 3 EU citizens wants an EU army to replace the NATO reliance. And we see right now that the EU army could be dispatched to any of the EU countries if they need assistance. If there's some type of civil disobedience, they can be dispatched. If there's an invasion, they can be dispatched. And it looks like they're trying to push this. And it looks like they're trying to have, the central bankers are trying to have their own armed forces. Now, we understand here in the United States that the Pentagon's F-35 stealth jet is a complete disaster. They spent $1 trillion on it, and it just doesn't work. So they decided to have a mock air battle between an F-16 jet and the new F-35 stealth jet, and it showed that the F-35 is too sluggish to hit an enemy plane or dodge gunfire, and it is a complete disaster. It's a complete waste of money, and it is one of the most expensive weapons in history, which just doesn't work. And this is why when people say, oh yeah, we can beat Russia, we can beat China. Well, again, China and Russia, they are not Yemen, Iraq, Libya. These are advanced actors, and a lot of their weapons and planes and missiles are better than the United States. They have better military assets. Plus, they have nuclear weapons. So this is not a fight we want to have, but of course, the warmongers up in the government, they want a fight. They want it to cover up the economic collapse. Now, we understand the United States government central bankers, they are continually trying to push their agenda. They want to get into Syria, then Iran. And we understand there's the P5+1 talks going on, and it looks like they're going to have some type of an extension. And right now we see there are a lot of companies and a lot of countries that would love to do business with Iran. In France, there's about 100 French companies that are making plans to send a joint delegation to the Iranian capital because they would love to do business with Iran. I mean, back before the sanctions, France and Iran stood at over about 3.4 billion in 2011, but it fell to about 556 million after the sanctions were imposed. So they lost a lot of business. And Obama is out there and he's saying that, listen, he will walk away from a bad nuclear deal with Iran. Well, replace that with banking deal. He will walk away from a bad banking deal with Iran because, like I said in the past, this is not about nuclear weapons. This is about the central bank. This is about putting the dollar on the natural resources. Iran has not developed a nuclear weapon. There's no proof. The IAEA inspected their nuclear facilities. They signed the NPT agreement. And no one has ever found a nuclear weapon. Of course, the propaganda is out there, and they're telling us that Iran has a nuclear weapon. They're going to use it at any moment. This has been going on for 30 years. Why would they use a nuclear weapon? Because if they do it on Israel, if they do it here in the United States, what is going to happen in Iran, this small little country? It would be wiped out. So it makes no common sense of why they're pushing the propaganda. The propaganda is for the central bank. And he is out there saying that there must be a strong, rigorous verification mechanism for monitoring Iran's, of course he says, nuclear sites. I replace it with central banks. Obama sent a fresh warning to Iran leaders and negotiators, saying that, listen, we need to be extremely clear that a deal must block Iran from getting access to the central banks once we have them. But of course he's saying access to nuclear weapons. If they wanted nuclear weapons, they would have built them already. They would have used them already over the 30 years. But they haven't, because it's complete and utter propaganda. Actually, a lot of the information that came out about Iran having nuclear weapons came from the CIA, which forged documents, which planted fake evidence. And this is the way governments work. We see Putin is out there, and he's saying that all nations must unite against, I'm going to call him the proxy army of the United States. Because what he's trying to do is he's trying to rally all the countries to come to the aid of Syria. Shouldn't we be in this fight together to fight terror? Shouldn't we be working together and help Assad? I mean, think about what he's saying. And think about what the United States government central bankers are saying. We don't want Assad's help. We don't want Russia's help. We don't want China's help. Why? If we're all fighting this disgusting, deadly group, we should all band together and work together. But of course, we know the central bankers, the U.S. government central bankers, they don't want this because their mission, their whole objective is to go in and remove Assad. And this is what they've been working up to. The goal is always the same and has not changed. Their tactics might change, but the goal is always the same. And we can see now that they are definitely getting ready. They're definitely getting ready to push. And they're hoping that when they get into Syria and they maybe remove Assad without starting a war with Russia, they can build their pipeline, take over their central bank, place the dollar on their natural resources, and the only country left is Iran, and then they will go back into all the other countries and restore the puppet governments in those countries. This is what we see happening right now, and this is a signal to everyone that they are pushing the agenda because they realize that the economy is completely falling apart. Now, can they prop it up for a little while longer? Of course they can. They can use tricks. They can create money. They can inflate the bubbles. They've been doing it for a very long time, but sooner or later, they will not be able to do it. They will lose control, and they know this. And this is why they're accelerating everything. They see what's happening in Greece. They see what's going on in Puerto Rico. They see in Italy, France. This is a domino effect, which basically now is out of their control, and they understand this. We see JH15. It's not going to end in September. We're getting word that they have extended it into November, and this is Jade Helm I'm talking about. And the question is, why is this being extended now? What is planned? Do they believe they're going to lose control during this period and they're going to give the green light for a go-ahead? Because everything is positioned and ready for some type of an event. I know the FBI, DHS is all out there giving us warnings about this 4th of July. Now, again, something could happen. Something might. They could use it to say, oh, look, they're coming after our freedoms, our independence. Or are they just doing it to keep control of the people, to keep them in fear for the next event? And while all this is going on, we realize that this economy is barely limping along. The statistical information does not match the real economy indicators. I mean, they're telling us that we're almost at full employment. Shouldn't we see retail expanding? Shouldn't we see real estate completely booming? If we're at full employment or very close to it, we should see real estate very close to 2007, 2006 highs. We should see retail sales bursting at the seams. Now, of course, people are saying, well, the reason for that is because of the internet. Well, then we should see internet sites, all the sales increasing dramatically because people have so much disposable income that they just, they don't have to worry. We're just going to keep spending. But guess what? We're not seeing that. They wouldn't need all the draconian programs for giving loans to subprime people, 0% down. That wouldn't be needed. The college graduates would be able to get a job, no problem. But we're not seeing that. They wouldn't have trouble paying back their student loans. Again, we're not seeing that either. So what we're seeing is the signal to let us know that something is about to happen, and they're about to cover it up by blaming it on another group or country. And this is what we're seeing right now, and we're heading towards that event. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.